Hi everyone, welcome to this latest episode of VFX Notes. I'm Ian Fales from Befores and Afters, and as always, I'm joined by Hugo Guerra from Hugo's Desk. How you going, Hugo?
Hey, hi everyone, and hi Ian. How's it going?
I'm good. I'm going to say it every time that we meet up, Hugo, until it's over. We're still in lockdown here in Sydney. My hair is getting really long. We're not allowed to have haircuts. I haven't shaved. I'm sorry for that. But things are fine. We're just in lockdown. That's what's happening in Sydney right now.
Yeah.
Well, which is not happening in London, in UK, is it?
No. In fact, this weekend I went out. And my God, it is packed now. Like the tube is packed, the trains are packed, tourists are out there. It was very sunny this weekend as well. So yeah, I think London is starting to feel a bit more like normal London. Although you go to the tube, of course, everyone was a mask, so of course that's different. But yeah, it feels good. It's also very sunny here for some weird reason. Something happened. I don't know like what happened, but it's really sunny here for the moment. But yeah, it feels good to go out. You know, I went to the museum. We went to a restaurant. We had some nice pizzas. You know, like it was my birthday this weekend, so we went out and did a bunch of things and it was nice to go out of the house and to forget everything for a while. You know, it was good.
Well, welcome everyone to the birthday edition of VFX Notes. I'm not sure what your present is, Hugo, from me, but we'll talk about that later. You know, one of the unfortunate side effects of lockdown here in Sydney is that cinemas are not open. And depending on how Hollywood studios have structured their release, some of their big films are also not necessarily day and date on video on demand. So I just want to put it out there that I haven't seen some big films, which sucks. I haven't seen Marvel's latest film. I haven't seen Free Guy. Now, we're talking about Free Guy. That's kind of weird today, but we'll come to that. I'm a bit worried about whether I'm going to see Bond or whether I'm going to see Venom.
Oh yeah, that's right, because they're not going to be in streaming. Of course not. They won't do that. And Dune also.
Not straight away, I don't think.
You have Dune as well coming. Yeah.
Matrix 4. Let's just see what happens.
Oh man, sucks. That's not good. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
No, but I think Dune will be on HBO at least, but it's not the same. I'm gonna watch it on an IMAX just like like you suggested. You know, I know the director actually tweeted just now saying, "Go and watch it on an IMAX."
Yeah. Oh man, I wish IMAX here opened as well. But anyway, Hugo, before we start talking about what we're talking about today, what else have you been up to this week? What's been happening?
Yeah,
in Hugo's Desk world.
So I've been very busy. I'm just wrapping up the project. I know I say this every week, but I'm wrapping up the project with the Rebellion. We're almost done. That's my big production that I'm finishing off. And then Hugo's Desk had a really big week because to celebrate my birthday, I did a bit of a weird thing. I put out my nuke course with a big promotion. So I was 43 years old, so I made a 43% discount on the course. So that was a big thing. So we had a lot of people signing up, and we have a lot of new students, and dealing with that this week. You know, giving them the logins and giving the access to the course and recording some new classes as well. And so yeah, I'm very very busy. But it feels good to be busy. It's good.
Over at Befores and Afters, Hugo, there's a lot been going on too. I've been wrapping up issue 3 of the print magazine. That's going to go to the printers really soon. I'm really excited about that issue. Also, there's a billion podcasts that I've been doing. You can listen to those over at the site. A lot related to VFX futures, you know, looking forward at virtual production and game engines and other tech in VFX. There's some really fun ones coming for VFX artifacts, where I've taken a few old interviews and turned them into podcasts, interviews with people like Phil Tippett. So check out those as well. So yeah, it sounds like we've both got a lot going on, which is always cool. And visual effects industry is super crazy busy at the moment too, right?
It is super busy. And my God, you've put out too many podcasts and I can't keep up. Like, it's just too many podcasts to listen to. There's not enough walks on the day to actually listen to all of them. No, but yeah,
Well,
things are crazy. You can see it on LinkedIn. There's like recruitment, looking for artists, it's just insane. So if you're a junior artist at the moment listening to this podcast, now is the time to strike the iron, send your show reels, because people are really looking for work. You need to do it now because it's a really special moment. Just like we predicted last year, once the lockdown would start to ease off, a lot of work would come through because a lot of things got delayed, so they're just waiting there to be done.
Yeah, and I think it is that, isn't it? But it's also, if you think about the content that we're watching, not just because things were delayed.
Yeah.
There's TV, obviously. There's streaming.
Yeah.
There's movies. Then there's animation. And I mean, Hugo, you and I don't talk about animation probably enough, frankly. Yeah. But there is just so much animation in terms of long form.
Short
TV
form
shows.
TV shows. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
you're right. Like, and this is not just. People will always think, oh, Crunchyroll, and you have manga in Japanese. No, we're talking about like, even if you just swap to the children's channel, which there are many, there's new shows coming out all the time, both in Disney, both on Nickelodeon, but like there's a lot of work coming out as well there, which all of it has to be comped and CG'd and everything as well. So, guys, go and get some work. Go for it.
Well, Hugo, we thought we'd do something fun this week and talk about games.
Yes.
But talk about games that have been turned into films.
Yeah.
And the inspiration for that is the movie Free Guy with Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah.
Now, here's a full disclosure. As I mentioned, because of lockdown, I haven't been able to see it. But if you head over to Befores and Afters, there's actually a whole bunch of coverage of the film. Now, look, that happens a lot. Films, typically get released earlier in the States than Australia.
Yeah.
Until recently. And so I'm able to see enough of Free Guy and to be shown things in order to do these interviews. But we're going to push ahead and talk about the film, and then I might chime in with things that I've covered on the movie. But Hugo, what did you think of Free Guy?
Yeah, so I went to the cinema to see this. Didn't saw it in IMAX, although there is an IMAX release. I saw it just on a regular cinema. It's big. Like I was, well, first of all, it's just first impressions. The film is really fun. It's really, it's a big comedy. It's really fun, like Ryan Reynolds always does. It's a really fun film, which people should go and watch. But it's a bit too much for me. I thought it was, oh man, my God, there's so much happening on the screen sometimes that I almost like had seizures while I was watching. There is so many visual effects happening at the same time. The film is so much information that I really want to watch it again. Because it's one of those films that there's always something happening in the background, always. Like he's walking around the street and there's like an explosion on the back and some fight happening. Or he's like just strolling around getting a coffee and there's like an enormous fight and bank robbery happening on the background, all defocused. Like, so there's all these sorts of things happening at all time. The film is really interesting from that side of point of view. For me, I think the film is like Truman Show. It's a bit, I guess it's an homage probably like that. Because it is similar to Truman Show, I don't want to spoil the film too much, but if you watch the trailer, you'll see that, he's not really aware that he's a character on a video game. He's just basically walking around and he's really oblivious to his existence. So it is a little bit like Truman Show. He's unaware, a lot of weird stuff happening about him. He's what we call the PVC, which is like a character that is not playable, which are usually like filler characters on games. Whenever you play a game which has a big open world, you always have people walking around and people doing things. Those are controlled by the computer, and that's what
like
Ryan...
cycles.
Exactly, yeah. They're just
cycles almost.
Exactly, and they're usually like run by an AI. That's what the main character of the film is. I mean, the film was by far one of the best video game based films ever, although it's not based on any video game. But it really transmits the idea of a video game really well. As you know, Ian, I play a lot of video games. And this idea of an open world video game where, a bit like Grand Theft Auto, like you have a big city, a sprawling city, you can go anywhere on the city, and then you can do a lot of missions. This is the concept of the film. The film has this big city, and there's like heists happening, there's like robberies happening, there's like fights happening, there's like flying with helicopters, flying with cars. There's all this mayhem happening from the online people that are playing the game. and you see this mayhem, but you always see it through the perspective of the main character, Free Guy, which he's just like walking around, going to his job. He's like a bank teller, you know. I thought it was good. I think it was good. It wasn't groundbreaking, but I thought it's not as good as Truman Show, but I thought takes definitely a lot of inspiration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When it got released, it did really well, and that was a really promising thing given the pandemic.
Yeah.
But it felt like a very promising thing also because it's original IP, right?
Yeah.
This isn't a sequel.
No.
Or a prequel.
No.
It's an original concept. It has some fun things. I assume there is going to be a sequel made.
I'm sure there will. There's also, I don't want to spoil it, but at the end, there's all sorts of things leading up to a sequel for sure. Like, I can't see that they're not doing that. You're right. It is refreshing to see a new IP. And also, it's refreshing to see them get right. We're going to talk more about this on the rest of the podcast, but they really managed to convey the feeling of a video game, and they managed to convey what you do on a video game very well. You could see that someone that wrote this film and directed this film has actually played games. You know, I think that's one of the problems we sometimes have with certain films done by the studios, is that they don't really understand the format, they really don't understand the content, but you can clearly see these people really know what they're doing, and that's why it's so... And also they got to correct people. You know, the film has a lot of cameos, and a lot of the cameos are actually from YouTubers and from Twitch streamers, and, you know, you have like Ninja there, you have like a lot of people playing Fortnite. There's a lot of really little small... like them as the real people on YouTube and Twitch commenting the game, you know, so it connects to the real world really well, and I think that was really smart, because obviously people that this generation that go and watch this film, they all know YouTube, they all know Twitch, they know these streamers, you know, very well.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really smart touch that they had those people on the film, you know.
Yes. In terms of the visual effects, we'll talk in a minute about some specific things that I've covered. But did you feel, because it could be game-like, that they could just go a little bit way out with some of these things? I mean, you'll see in the trailer that, you know, there's explosions and streets being leveled and things being pixelated. And I felt like it seemed like they did a great job of, you know, it's photoreal, it looks good, but it's also in the game style, right?
Yeah, so the visual effects are really interesting, I think, and that's why it deserves really a watch. If anyone loves visual effects, they should go really watch it, because on one hand, you have the complete, absolute photorealism. Like, you have that side of things, where you have set extensions, you have buildings. When he's walking around, you just see these massive tower blocks, you see these massive city landscapes, which are all mostly CG extensions or matte paintings on the background, and a lot of integration with the real plates, because they went in location and then they've added a lot of things. So you have that, which is completely photoreal. On the middle of it, then, you have a highly stylized glitch effect. Like, you have some glitch effects that kind of have to do when they put the glasses on. And kind of going back to a John Carpenter classic, which is a film called They Live, where on that film, they put the glasses and they see the real world, the world with aliens, the world where you have messages of saying, obey, consume. It's the same thing here, but on a joke side. Like, when he puts the glasses, when the main character of the film, which is an NPC, is not a playable character, when he puts the glasses of one of the players, he then sees the real player world. So that means he sees the power-ups, he sees the weapons, he sees the menus. Basically, he sees the interface that people do when they play a game. You know, that you have the life bar, you have how many bullets you have the little mini map. So the film is very photoreal at a certain point, and then as soon as he puts the glasses, just like on John Carpenter film, you then have this this superimposed on the world with menus and everything, and it's all completely tracked into the film seamlessly. So it's really nice.
Yeah.
Because even the glitches, the cool thing about it is that even the glitches, like if you see like a life bar, like a life item that you can pick up on the sidewalk, for example, it looks like a graphical pixelated version of that item, but it's still doing ray tracing. It's still lighting up the pavement, you know. So it's like really well integrated, but pixelated. So very, very interesting style that they've done that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, that I think is interesting, only partly because it obviously fits the conceit of the film, but also I was thinking when I saw that in clips, oh, that's the kind of glasses I want for like an AR view of Boston or the world. That is this. It actually does represent what people want to be this thing called the metaverse, which is you're out and about and using XR, AR, VR, goggles or glasses. You overlay a different kind of experience of the real world.
Yeah.
And so I'm just thinking that Free Guy in some way, even though it's a bit more of a story point thing, taps into that fun side of things.
It does, yeah. I know what you mean. Obviously, that is a perspective from... Obviously, I didn't even thought about that because, since I play games, I just saw it and I saw, oh yeah, there's the interface of a game. But you're absolutely right, because there are a lot of companies in the world working on that, with advanced... they're trying to miniaturize that technology so you can actually have augmented reality glasses, proper ones, not the ones like we have now, which are just too bulky and too big for you to walk around. So definitely, especially Microsoft and Google are working a lot on that. I mean, I think Google kind of stopped a bit, but Microsoft already has version 2 of their HoloLens and everything. So this is like a HoloLens, but obviously on the film, it's just regular glasses. You don't even there's no bulk on them and whatsoever. So there's that side of things. There's a little moment on the film, which, I mean, people that play games will know exactly what I mean. There's a really interesting part of the film. That's when things go really nuts, when you see buildings constructing and rebuilding. Because obviously, when you're watching the film, the main character of the film, Ryan Reynolds, he talks with one of the players of the game. And then he talks also with one of the designers of the game by audio. And so the designer of the game is able to change the game landscape while they are on the game. So sometimes buildings grow up and they change while they're playing. And so there's a moment which looks exactly like Fortnite, which is an incredible CG moment where you have staircases being made by pieces of the surrounding environment. So you have they have to have a staircase to go up. And so pieces of concrete and pieces of windows and cars just fly around through the environment to build this staircase. And it's a bit like Fortnite, where you actually build staircases to continue your fights on the game. So that was a really nice touch. So from an environmental point of view, the film is wow, it is really stunning work that they've done. But there's a lot of other things as well. There's a lot of CG characters, and especially my favorite one is this really, really augmented version of Ryan Reynolds. You have this kind of muscular version of Ryan Reynolds, which is ridiculous. He's a really dumb character because his brain is not developed, because they didn't. It's so funny because they say they didn't finish the programming of his AI, so he's really dumb because they didn't finish the programming, but the body is finished. He's really strong. So it's a bit the film is really funny on that sense. So at some point on the film, he fights between himself. Yeah.
Is that a CG character, or do you reckon that possibly could be a prosthetic build?
I think it's both. There's a lot of moments. I'm not entirely sure because not a lot of breakdowns are out yet. But there's a lot of moments that I noticed that it is a real body of a real. It looks like there's a really like a double, and then they've actually comped his head on it. And sometimes you can see that it's full CG, and sometimes you can see that it's a mix of both. So I think there's a lot of trickery going on there, but I'm not sure because we haven't seen much of that. We haven't really seen any breakdown or anything like that. I wouldn't be surprised if it is a mix of everything, of both CG and mixing bodies and prosthetics, and because it looks very good. So I think it's definitely combination of a lot of them. But yeah, he's like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but with the head of Ryan Reynolds, which is really fun.
Great.
He looks really cool. But yeah, the film is really interesting, and I don't know. There's a lot of things I could say that will really spoil. I don't want to spoil it. That's the thing. There's a lot of things that are really fun gags and really nice jokes that you just have to go and see it because this film is from Disney, not Disney. It's Fox, but it's Disney. So they do have a lot of cameos of a lot of other properties on the film. Let me just say that. There's a lot of really cool stuff going on.
Okay. Well, let's talk about some of the specific moments, and I'll try and weave in where I have been able to cover it. There's a really great one-er that opens the film, and it features Channing Tatum
Yeah.
skydiving into the world, and it's basically a one-er from all the way from the skydive into a car chase, all the way up to Ryan Reynolds, looking out the window, oblivious to all this action going on.
Yeah.
And I think that shot plays out really well. I love that opening shot, which I've seen. But I got to talk to the team at Halon, who did the previs for that and a lot of other visualization for the film. That's a podcast coming out soon at Befores and Afters. But, Hugo, previs is such a fascinating area now, isn't it? For lots of reasons. One is it's story building. I find that fascinating just on its own. But these companies like Halon, they've really adopted now so many real-time tools and virtual production tools to do their previews, which tended always to be done in like Maya Playblast, right, so that they could turn it around pretty quickly. But now they tend to be using Unreal Engine and other game engines to turn it around even more quickly, to do things on set, to be able to show the director and other filmmakers things in real time and change things. And basically in that podcast you'll hear is they break down that opening one-up all the way from, the early previs through to their tech viz, where it needed Channing and other characters to be shot on green screen for the car, at least for the car moments, and they also mentioned they use one of these robotic cameras to stitch bits together and
they use motion control cameras. Yeah,
which, all those things get used, but I think it's really interesting that, that all has to be planned, and that's where previous visualization companies, I think, come in really handy.
Yeah, this film is very heavy on that for sure, because the film is so complex. That's the thing. You really need to previs, especially that shot. That shot happens right at the beginning of the film, and it's a really complex shot because the camera flies around and it does a lot of takeovers from a lot of different plates. So but the entire film, I feel like it had to most likely be completely previs from start to bottom, because there is not a single shot on the film that there's not something else happening on the background. Because that's the interesting part about this film, is that you're just watching them having a coffee or walking around or doing other things or just talking, and then there's like a world of visual effects happening on the background with a lot of different things happening, like from flying people with rockets and putting down an helicopter. It's really, really interesting in that sense. But yeah, like but they you now have it. You're now starting to have. I mean, we remember the time where Third Floor was the only place in town that was kind of doing these kind of things. But now there's so many different companies doing previs, and it's now become really part of the integral part of these films, I think, because it used to be like it was just like some productions would go to the bother of having it and actually going through it, but now it's essential. There's no way you're gonna be cost effective or even do this job in time without having a full previs. Otherwise, they're gonna go on set and they don't even know what they're doing. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, yes. And I believe Digital Domain ultimately did the visual effects for that opening one-er.
Yeah.
They also did a whole bunch of other effects and some previs, and I won't go through all that, but I happened to talk to their visual effects supervisor, Nikos, about one particular aspect of the work, which was fascinating, Hugo, especially in the context of previous discussions you and I have had about digital humans and deepfakes. And this is like a really minor moment, again with Channing Tatum, like halfway through the film, where he meets Ryan Reynolds and another character. And it's sort of that thing that you mentioned before is revealed, where a player is playing the game and seeing a game version of Channing Tatum's character on their computer screen at home. But then the live action from the game is also intercut with that. Anyway, there was a scene where, or apparently what happens is there's a bunch of those gameplay sequences. And Digital Domain and possibly other studios had to create game-level quality characters for Ryan Reynolds and Channing Tatum. Anyway, at some point, Channing Tatum's game-level character talks in that screenshot. And they didn't have Channing Tatum facially captured or motion captured for that talking. So they animated it. And it didn't look quite right. You know, because that's tricky to do, I guess, to get all his mannerisms. And also, he wasn't originally meant to talk, and they changed the lines. So, what I found really interesting, Hugo, is that they decided to use, for this game-level character, Digital Domain decided to use their deep fake tool
to create
it. And their deep fake tool is called Charlatan. You can check this out also on a podcast.
I love the name. Charlatan.
Yeah, but I know, I love it. And they've used that previously on TV commercials and other projects. But and what happened was when they did it, that sold the director on the believability because, you know, they had training data of Channing's previous performances.
And probably other films as well. Probably other films.
Yeah, other films. Yeah.
It's really interesting.
That's fascinating, isn't it?
It's fascinating also because until I saw your article, I didn't even know about it or even suspected this, you know. You're right. Like, there's a really cool thing about this film is that a lot of moments when you're watching through the people's screens, you know, when you're watching the YouTube streams or the Twitch streams of the game, you see a stylized version of the film happening on those screens. And it's like, you know, the animation is a bit more rough and the shading is a bit more off. And it looks kind of like a really advanced version of Grand Theft Auto. It looks a really big advanced version, but it still looks like gameplay. But it looks better than gameplay. But yeah, that moment is really fascinating. By the way, Chastain, he does a really good role on the film. He actually shows up quite a lot, more than I thought, actually. And that moment is really funny as well, especially because then you see who he really is in reality, in the real life, because he's just like a teenager, a little kid living with his mother, and his mother's like cleaning the house while he's like pretending to be this really big, sexy guy playing a game. It's really, really funny, that moment. But yeah, I guess this is probably, wouldn't this be like, it's now become mainstream. We talk about a lot about deep fakes, and we talk about a lot about, and a lot of people still continue to put on YouTube comments, oh, why don't the studios use deepfake? Why don't you? They do. They've been using deepfake for a while. And I guess this is like a bit more out there because people know that it was done in deepfake. I'm imagining that there's more stuff going on than everyone actually thinks. But this technology is definitely being used by the studios,
Yeah. Not to make this a deepfake conversation,
but
we're already there, Hugo. I mean, the interesting thing here is that they didn't need it to be live action photoreal, you know, Channing Tatum. So that isn't out in a way, right? That helps. They already had an animated performance. Now that's something that I think is there's a lot of misinformation about deepfakes, which is people see a CG character done or a de-aged character done, and then on YouTube they go and do a deepfake on top of that character. And I think what they haven't realized is that all the work has already been done, and they're just deep faking on top of the work. It's very hard to start from scratch with a deep fake, especially when that character has to emote and move. I recommend people watch the recent Mandalorian Disney Plus gallery scene on show on the young Luke Skywalker in season 2, where they actually run through the fact that they tried deepfakes and ultimately didn't use it. You know, they approached it in a different way with the classic sort of de-aging.
But it's funny,
because I think
because they went full circle, because then you have people on YouTube saying we've used deepfake to fix it on that specific shot.
Exactly.
But then they tried it and it didn't work out.
They tried it. They tried it, but they need to make Luke talk. And so deepfakes is, I mean, unless I'm totally wrong, it's essentially a 2D process. So you can't fiddle with it. You can't get blend shapes out of it, can you? I mean, someone will tell me that I'm completely wrong about this.
I don't know if you saw like some of the coverage and some of the behind the scenes of that Tom Cruise YouTube video where he's running and saying all the films he's done. That thing looks remarkably good on some shots, and some shots it doesn't.
Yeah.
That thing only really worked really well because the actor already looked a bit
Exactly.
like Tom Cruise. He already had the physiognomy of Tom Cruise, and he was actually an impersonator of Tom Cruise. So he actually already had the facial things. He already had the tropes. He even had the voice, which was similar. So it already helped the system quite a lot because the person already kind of looks like him, so...
Yeah. But they're not shot sculpting on the Tom Cruise fun Instagram videos. No. And that would have had to have been something they would have had to have done with young Luke Skywalker from the stand-in actor to... and the older Mark Hamill. Anyway, we totally have hijacked this talk ourselves.
That's okay. People already know how this goes. Anything related with Hugo's desk is always a garbage truck on fire. Don't worry. It always kind of goes off it always goes off course in some reason. No, but let's go back to Free Guy. Well, I mean, I don't have much more to say about Free Guy. I do feel like it's a massive production. It involves Digital Domain, Scanline, ILM, Lola, Renault. There's so many companies involved. The credits go forever. Go and watch it because it's really an interesting film. Like you said, it's like a new IP, and it's nice to see something fresh. It's nice to see something fresh coming out of Fox and coming out of Disney. And I guess, have you noticed Reynolds is really a big pusher for this thing because he's been pushing a lot of projects that look really different. I mean, if you look at how Deadpool turned out, he's a really big he's very involved on this film as well, in this production. He's very involved on everything he does. So it's interesting to see his progress and how he's doing these films.
Oh, I love him. I love him. Have you ever seen a really great film he did called The Green Lantern?
Yeah.
Not his fault.
Oh my God, I know. Oh my God, but it's so funny that he actually jokes about the film himself. It's so funny.
I love it. It was on TV the other night, and I had totally forgotten that Taika Waititi is in it, who's also in Free Guy.
Yeah, he's really funny he's so funny on Free Guy, by the way. He's so funny. He's like the star video game director that everyone has to bow on to. It's really funny as character. But yeah, I know. Ryan Reynolds really knows how to... That's the thing, the cool thing about Free Guy. It's a film that doesn't take itself seriously, and it's really funny. And I think that is why a lot of video games, a lot of films based on video games fail, because they take themselves too seriously. I think that's the thing. This film really is playful, just like a video game is, and I think that's why it works so well, So.
Yeah. Well, that's a great segue, because we are talking about films that have come out of games.
Yeah.
And I think, just to jump on that point, Hugo, I think you're right. I wonder whether filmmakers possibly feel that games are inherently dark and mysterious and serious, and that some of these films based on games end up that way, whereas, and I have to say not always very successfully, whereas the ones that are much more playful and a bit tongue-in-cheek seem to work, right? That's sort of a generalization, but I think that is right.
It is. As someone that plays games, it's very difficult to explain how you feel when you play video games, because you're right. There's a lot of darkness. There's a lot of horror games. There's a lot of those kind of games. But the majority of the video games are fun experience. The majority of the video games history is fun experimentations and shooters and arcade-based games and games that have to do with grinding and looting, and it is video games are generally something that you do to relax, and you do to chill, and you do to kind of get transported to another reality. So obviously I do feel that sometimes films take it too seriously, and that's not the case about Free Guy at all. They really nail it, that feeling of playing a video game, of being really absorbed by the story and going for it and going into. I also think it has to do... You'll see when we start talking about some of these films, I think it has to do with the fact that a lot of people that do these films have never played the game. I feel that's the issue as well. And I'm not saying that you need to play all the video games in the world, but you need to at least have an understanding of the medium to try to make a film based on it. And I feel like that there's a lot of that happening over the last 3 decades, where they just got like a director out of the blue and he did never play the game. He thought it was for kids, and then he just makes a film based on a game, and it goes it goes really badly. You know, there's so many examples of that. I know lately it's been changing because we've been having better films, but yeah, I don't know. Like there's a lot. Yeah. Yes. Go.
Yeah. Like, what is one from more recent times that you think actually did work?
So there's a lot of them that are working now. I think now it's different because we have this generation of filmmakers that actually played games. I think that's why. Because now the people that play games from my generation, I'm now 43. I started playing games when I was 6 with a Spectrum. And so my generation is now starting to make films. And that's why you have this connection. I feel like just recently, Mortal Kombat from 2021 really nails it. And I think that film...
Loved it.
Yeah, that film is really interesting because even when you look at the behind the scenes, you see they love the game, they know everything about the game, and they really wanted to make homage. The only thing I must say is that I think the film is so deep in lore that I'm sure it's difficult for anyone that has not played the games to understand it.
I had no idea what was going on.
Exactly.
No idea.
Exactly, because they didn't explain anything.
Yeah, I should really have said right at the beginning that despite my obsession with computer graphics and visual effects, I am not a gamer. I just don't happen to own a console. I've played games in my teen years in a big way, Nintendo, SNES, and
brought my
Nintendo
t-shirt
64. Yeah, exactly.
Brought my t-shirt.
But I don't play games, but I am obsessed also with films based on games because I'm always curious if they work or not.
Yeah.
Now, with Mortal Kombat, I had seen, of course, the original Mortal Kombat from whenever that was, the
99, 98, or something like that.
Yeah. And, it's a product of its time. I don't think it worked back then.
No.
Had some interesting visual effects things going on.
Yeah.
This one, it's just, what it does is, it just gets straight into it. It just knows the story it needs to tell, and it just does it.
But that's cool. That's cool about it because they pulled no punches. Like, it's like, okay, guys, anyone on the cinema, they probably played the game. And that's it. Like, because if you played the game, you know everything that is going on. Like, every single thing. Like, because this film is so lore heavy. Everything is correct, from Kano ripping his heart. That is the first fatality that Kano does on the game, From the actual the dragon, the big dragon swallowing the other guy. That's also the fatality of Liu Kang. Like, all these things are exactly correctly made, like it's so exact that you're watching the game. All the moves, all the actual martial art moves that you see from Scorpion, all the moves that you see from Sub-Zero, the sword that he has, Sub-Zero's sword with ice, the way that he controls ice and particles, that all is exactly from the game, especially from the rebooted game from 2009. Like, so at some point, Mortal Kombat has a long history. They have like 20 games, and it went really well, and then it became worse and worse and worse, and then it became really bad. The games were terrible. And then there was a huge reboot on 2009 by a studio called NetherRealms, which is an amazing studio. They also do Injustice. And they created this reboot for the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360 in 2009, and it really revolutionized Mortal Kombat. It kind of like brought a new sphere. And I think most of this film is based on that game. And now, of course, Mortal Kombat 10 and Mortal Kombat 11, which is the games that 11 is the one that came out like a couple of months ago, like about a year ago. So yeah,
I've got to say that as a non-gamer, I enjoyed the film. It's just a fun plot.
Yeah.
But also, as a watching experience, it's pretty full on. It's pretty violent.
Yeah.
But actually, that's really exciting to watch because I would say possibly some of these big films that are based on more horror genre games pull their punches a little bit and possibly don't, depending on the rating that they're going for. This one, it doesn't care, does it?
No.
You see a lot of stuff going on.
These fatalities are, and also like, there's like at least 3 fatalities on the game, and the first one you see, which is the girl being split in half by the hat, by Liu Kang's hat. That one is exactly like the one on the game. Also, the one where the fire is they're all exact copies, replicas of the game, and I think that is such a fan service that they've made. Although, it's funny that you're saying that, because a lot of people complain that the film doesn't go too far. Because in the game, you actually see an X-ray version of the person being killed, and you actually see the bones breaking with an X-ray vision, and you see the blood splashing inside and the organs exploding. So you even go that far in the game, and they didn't do that on the film, because I think if they would have done that on the film, I don't think they would be able to get away with the rating.
I don't think they'd get an R rating. They'd have to go higher if there is one.
But from a visual effects point of view, those fatalities are really interesting, because if you look at the behind the scenes and you look at how they shot them, there's a lot of things going on, of course, but if we focus just on those fatalities, they are a mixture of a lot of CG, of course, and a lot of particles, but they also have a lot of props on set. There's a lot of actual goo and gore and these kind of like gory, messy, bloody bags, and there's a lot of things that they've actually done practically with dolls and with props and with pieces of latex and painted little props and everything, which is really interesting, which serves as a really great base to create these visual effects,
Yeah. I felt like, here's what sometimes happens with these game films too. The reviews of the film, good or bad, often say, oh, it's full of CG game logic or CG stuff. No, they say that. I'm not weighing into whether they do or not.
Yeah, of course.
In this film, the practical side of some of those effects really elevated the response to the film and felt more grounded.
Yeah.
And, it's a lie to say that, all those fatalities and shots are digitally enhanced. There's a digital hand in them, but they seem to start with some sort of basis, which is great.
Yeah, and I think not to be. I'm going to use a trope from the game, because on the game, when you win a battle without being touched, it's called a flawless victory. The visual effects are flawless. They're really good. Like, from everything, even little moments, even like Liu Kang has these fireballs on his hands, and you have this beautiful light integration that they've done with LEDs, and even when Raiden is transporting himself with the lightning effects, you have these beautiful, the grips actually put up LED lamps all around him to actually light him correctly with the lightning. There's all this kind of sense and reality of the film, of all these little magical moments and portals. The funny thing is that it's all magical, and it's all nonsense, because it's all kind of unrealistic, of course. There's a guy with 4 arms, and there's lightning everywhere. But it's all shot so realistically because they had that practical effect on set as well, both from the supervisor and the lighting crew. It really helped. It really, really helped. The film became beautiful because of it. I feel like it's a spectacle to watch, and also it's beautifully shot. Anamorphic lenses all over the place, beautifully bokehs. You have really, really a nice depth of field. It's really, really well shot as well.
Yeah, I feel like one benefit of the film is that it seemed to be a little bit under the radar. It was shot here in Australia, in South Australia, relatively low budget, a big Warner Brothers release, during the pandemic, which is amazing. But sometimes those films are not overhyped if they're released that way, or if they're under the radar a little bit. So really great work. Couple of great visual effects studios involved. I talked to Rising Sun about their work on many of the characters, and there's some really great breakdowns in the befores and afters story. But Hugo, I'm so glad you watched it, and I'm so glad that we seem to be turning a corner a bit on these game to films.
One last thing. There's a lot more to go on Mortal Kombat, and you should go and watch it. There's a lot more, but one last thing I wanted to really mention. It's the Goro character, which is like the big boss of the first game, of the original game from the 90s, which is this big dude with 4 arms. I don't know, like people should go really and watch the behind the scenes. They are so funny.
Oh, yeah, I love it. The blue
because
screen
there's like
guy.
two
I
guys.
love it.
There's two guys with a blue screen suit, and they're fighting at the same time. Like there's a guy lower with the two arms, and then there's a guy higher with the other two arms, and so there's like two dudes fighting him at the same time.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. Like it's so funny to watch those behind the scenes.
Yeah.
No, but the
But
film
it works, doesn't it?
it works really well. Yeah, the film's visual effects, I guess, like for me, highlights of the day really was the slow motion bullet moment. There's like the Sub-Zero freezes the gun while the bullet is still coming out of it. That is a really badass moment. It's really beautiful. The arms breaking from Jack is also really important, which is also like a point of the plot of the game where Jack really loses his arms and then they have to put metallic arms. That visual effect on itself, every time Jax is on the screen, it's a huge visual effect because the guy is so big. And then he has like these almost transparent, really thin metallic arms that you see through. So they had to have massive amounts of cleanup to try to put the background back. And there's like handheld cameras going on, people walking around, and he's just like with this green screen t-shirt with dots. It's really, really powerful. But then you also have like some beautiful frozen swords as well. You have the ice blocks. Everything.
Hugo, we got to move on, man.
I know. Guys, go and see it because it is a spectacle. It's a spectacle.
Okay.
You know? Yeah.
I feel like we've got this list here, everybody, of like a million films we want to talk about. So we should try and get through it. I'll tell you another film from a game to a film that I thought worked so well. Was the Detective Pikachu movie. Yeah. It's got a longer title than that. It's cutesy. It's a bit weird. I honestly don't know that much about Pokemon, but I seriously loved it. I responded so well to that movie because I felt like the CG Pokemon characters were given just as much appearance and entitlement as the human characters.
Yeah.
And, that's kind of what's meant to happen in that Pokemon world, I suppose. And then we could talk about the visual effects later, but they were integrated in one of the best ways in a recent film that I've seen. But what about you? What did you think of that latest Pokemon movie, Hugo?
Yeah, so I'll be honest, like I never really played Pokemon games. It's not really my type of game because it's like more a role-playing fighting game. Like I really don't play those kind of games, but yeah, you're right. Like the film is really fun. I don't really understand most of what was going on. The film has really some big moments and battle scenes at the end, but it is mind-blowing when you see Pikachu for the first time and then you start... He's a real character. He exists. The compositing and the CG and the lighting are flawless. And I think that's really interesting because he becomes a real character. You completely forget that he exists. You completely forget and you really believe that he's there because it's so seamless from all levels, like the way that he interacts with the people walking around and on top of them, interacting with the surroundings, and also, of course, the lighting interaction from all the neon lights. And a lot of shots are at nighttime. There's like puddles, there's reflections, there's waters, there's all sorts of things interacting. And just for that alone, even if you haven't seen Pokemon or even if you haven't really heard of Pokemon or even played the game, it's a really beautifully shot film and really funny as well. Like, it's really, really funny, isn't it?
Now, I have only just realized the connection with Free Guy, which is obviously Pikachu is played by Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah.
I don't think he played him on set, but I could be wrong about that. But definitely the voice, and there's some fun behind the scenes footage of like Ryan Reynolds with tracking dots and, a facial capture cam for that sort of work. But Hugo, in terms of the integration of these characters, I reckon I have a theory that the filmmakers early on realized that, hey, they're game characters. They'll look silly in a New York type environment or, a futuristic city environment or out in the bush. So they just said, we need to integrate these characters into a film like no other.
Yeah. And
I feel like, visual effects artists can do that. Yeah. They know how to do that.
Now they can. And now they can. The film is from 2019. So perfect timing for doing it. I know what you mean.
Of course, what they did was they had stuffies on set
Yeah.
for placement, for stand-ins, for eye lines, for lighting ref. They obviously used HDRIs.
Yeah.
They shot on film. That probably helps.
Yeah.
Because you get this, I don't know, patina. You get these grain. Something about that. There's something about that really helps with integration. But clearly, the rendering and compositing work, which is mostly done by MPC and Framestore here for the characters, is phenomenal. I honestly, if there was no other big film that year that came out, this should have won the VFX Oscar. That's how amazing the visual effects work is in that movie.
So, there's two things. One of them is what you said, which was really interesting. From a point of view of the characters, these are ridiculous characters. The Pokemon characters are manga-style characters. They are outrageous. They are comical. They're manga. They're cute. They're funny. They are definitely they look like dolls, And so the choice of making them photoreal, the choice of keeping them exactly like they are on the film, on the games, and exactly like they are on the manga magazines, and on the posters and on the cards, but making them with photoreal materials, it's a brilliant idea, because it gives you this suspense and this disbelief. It looks real, but it's not. It's unreal, but it's real. It's like it really works, because the feathers and the fur and the glassy eyes, everything is absolutely photoreal as this glass, but then the character looks like a doll. It's a perfect mix. The art direction on that sense was perfect, because they could have done the other way. They could have maybe make them a bit more realistic, or make them a bit more humanoid, or they could have tried to make it that way. And it wouldn't have been fair to the game, and it would have really, people wouldn't have actually had such a connection, I think. The other thing you said about film usually becomes a problem, not really a solution. It becomes a huge issue when you're compositing in film. And I think on this sense, it must have been a huge challenge, because film, has all sorts of complications. You have to scan it. You have to deal with the grain. You have to degrain it. You have to deal with the flickers that scans sometimes have. You have to deal with all the integration and all the aberrations that you have from the film stock, all the little minute aberrations you have from the lenses as well that are inputted on that. And I think obviously it helped when you nail it, because then it becomes even more photoreal, because if it had a very clinical look, there's so many aberrations happening, there's so much organic feeling into the look of the film that really helps to sell this idea that they are there. So you're absolutely right. That's absolutely right.
I think that's what I mean, that because it's on film, shot and if you saw it projected on film, or even just the general result, you kind of feel like it's more real. Yeah. Because that's the association some people make with film. That's not always the case. Yeah. And yes, all the hoops that the VFX team has to jump through to make it work on film is part of that, I think. So,
it is. But that extra layer of aberrations and lens distortions and grain and also diffuseness that you have on film really helped, because it just made it even more realistic. As opposed, I'm not saying that the film would have looked worse in digital. Of course, probably not. They would have made an amazing job anyway. But it's an interesting choice, I think, and not a very common choice. Not a lot of people are doing film work anymore, except, Tarantino and Nolan and certain directors, of course. But
not big video game franchises.
So it was an interesting choice for sure.
Yeah. You just said something there, Hugo, that made me think of a different film that we were going to talk about as well, which is, hey, we've got these video game characters which work in a video game. When we bring them into the human world, are they going to stand out too much? Are they going to look weird? And should we redesign them? Well, I wonder whether that was the first thinking behind Sonic. Yeah. Because it's very famously been a story in visual effects world that the filmmakers went with a particular direction in terms of the look of Sonic. It came out in a trailer, I think,
or at least in some. It was a reveal. Images. It was the first trailer that came out. Yeah.
Yeah, and people said, "That's not Sonic from the game. Yeah. What the hell are you doing?" And then, the director and the studio said, okay, you're right, we're going to go back and redesign it. And MPC and possibly some other studios redesigned the character from what had been originally done. And of course, Sonic worked amazingly. It's a funny film.
Yeah.
The design, probably by being much more of an ode to the original game, worked.
Yeah.
He's sarcastic, he's silly. Yeah. That also helps. But yeah, the design thing was curious because they really had done some stuff with the eyes to move away from Sonic from the game. And people just were in uproar, weren't they, Hugo?
They were. It was because it was creepy. That was the problem. I mean, I've been playing Sonic games since I know exactly how he looks. And now this was creepy because he had human eyes. He had like little hands.
Yeah, small eyes.
He had like little hands with fur, and it was just creepy. It looked like this kind of mutated Sonic version that came out of like a nuclear plant or something. And I don't know what they were thinking. And I guess we've talked a few times about this on this podcast. A lot of times people say, "Oh, so bad CG." It's a bit always about the design, isn't it? It's always like the design choices. A lot of times it's not the bad CG, it's the design choices. Because that Sonic looked real. It was well done. The fur, the simulation, the lighting, everything looked fine. And in paper, it should have worked, right? But then it was just too creepy. The direction they went with the design, that's what it killed it. And that's why people react. And that's exactly the opposite to Pokemon. I don't want to come back to that film, but on Pokemon, they were faithful to the game and they stuck with it, and then they made photoreal materials around it. And that's exactly what happened with the redo of Sonic. Sonic looks like Pikachu. He looks like the game, but he's photoreal. And he has animated features, but he still looks realistic enough to live on the environment. And I think that's where now some games are really nailing this. And I think Sonic really nailed. But I isn't this like one of the first times, Ian? I don't know what you think about this, but this is one of the first times where the audience, Twitter and YouTube, like basically trashed the trailer and something actually was changed, isn't it? This is one of the first times.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can think of too many other examples. Yeah. And, the truth is they could, because it's a CG-generated character. Yeah. The other side of that might be that the director, Jeff Fowler, is a visual effects artist. Yeah. He's from Blur Studio, or other things but Blur. And he just knew, perhaps, what the VFX team could pull off.
Yeah.
Right? I'm wondering if a different person was handling it, whether they would have had to delay the film. But maybe it was delayed a little bit.
I tell you one thing. I know people think it's like I know a lot of people might think it's a easy enough change to make, but my God, it's not. Like, because the problem is
well, that's what I mean.
Yeah. But you were right that I know that he most likely knew what could be achieved, and that's why they went to that route. Because also, like, if we think about it, he's not on all the shots of the film. Obviously, they don't have to redo everything, But it's a massive thing to go back to animation. It's massive because you have to topologize, you have to remodel, you have to relight, and you have to recomp everything. It's starting from scratch pretty much. Like it is right on those shots, just on those shots. The only thing you can reutilize is the plate, the cleanup that they've done, and also of course the HDRs and the lighting setups that they can keep, of course, because it's the same. At least that they don't have to change, which is a really difficult thing of the production anyway. But the rest was redone. Yeah, it's really interesting thing. Really, you guys should go and see the film. The film is really fun. It's really, really nice. They're doing a sequel, aren't they?
They're making a sequel. Yeah. I keep seeing shots from Vancouver where they have the stuffies out. I'm obsessed with stuffies. Yeah. I think really work. They're so fun to see on film sets. The interesting thing about Sonic is, I feel like, I did interview the director and I've talked to some NPC people, but they've kept it always a bit quiet about the redesign and about stuff like that. And part of that, Hugo, is, you must know this, sometimes the work you see in trailers, it's actually pretty early work anyway.
Yeah.
And it's often done just for the trailer.
Yeah.
It often has film shots from the film. And so when we say, these were the shots in the film, well, those shots were still in production anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm not convinced anything was finished, finalized, or whatever, except maybe the design. And so sometimes it's about the misinformation that gets out there, in relation to a redesign or oh my God, now you're making everyone work 80 hours. I'm sure they turned on a dime and they did an incredible job, but it's not always what you read in, the online chatter, right?
No, of course not. In trailers, yes, you're right. Like a lot of, and sometimes you even have shots that never show up on the film. They are done in a trailer and they never actually end up being in the film. And also, like, you sometimes have other things where you had a shot on the trailer and then you watch the film and it's the same shot, but it's completely different. They made massive changes on it. So it's a fluid situation. It really goes until the last minute. So you're absolutely right. Like, perhaps maybe a lot of shots of Sonic were not done yet. Maybe they could still kind of redo this in a... I don't think that we'll never know the full story anyway, because I don't think they want to talk about this. Maybe in 20 years. Maybe in 20 years.
They want people to just watch the film.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just want people to watch the film.
In 20 years, when you see the Blu-ray 30-year edition, there will be a behind the scenes with a lot of old people talking about this. That's what's going to happen,
Okay. Now, Hugo, you watched a film. I think rewatched or maybe watched it for the first time for this chat. We've got to talk about some films that don't work from games, right? We need to do that. Now, what was the film you watched?
You're talking about Super Mario Bros? Is that the one you're talking about? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay, so... Come
on.
Ian, I struggled. Yes, I'll be honest. Like, I know I've seen this film when I was a kid. I know that because I remember getting the all excited getting the rental on my video club, getting the VHS and watching it a lot of times. I don't remember anything. Like, I think I was like maybe 8 or 9 years old, and now I watched it again. I bought the Blu-ray, the 35 year edition, and I watched it last night. And oh my God, it's the worst film I've seen in like at least 10 years. It's like, how did this even got green lit? How is that even possible?
Well,
it's shocking. It's such a horrible film. It's terrible. I know you kind of like it, I know, but...
I kind of love it. It's so bad it's good. It's got nothing to do with Nintendo Mario Brothers at all.
Nothing. Zero. If people don't even need to know it's based on the game. It has zero to do with the game. Zero.
Yeah, and we don't know the full story, but there was definitely change in directors and directors fighting who were married and all this sort of
there was a lot of that.
Stuff.
But you know why they got the film? Because Nintendo had this hot property, Super Mario. Everyone wanted to do a film. Warner Bros. Wanted to do it. Emblem wanted to do. Everyone wanted a piece of this pie because the game was like stratospheric on the world at the moment. And this small studio, this producer with a small studio, a small budget, actually got the film because he actually took the time to fly to Japan. He flew to Japan, met the president of Nintendo, and actually pitched the project to him. And then as the story is told, the president of Nintendo asked him, "Why should I give you the film since we have Warner Bros., we have Disney, we have all these people wanting to do the game?" And the guy literally just answered them, "Well, because I'm here and they're not." And he gave him the film. And it's like, it makes so much sense because I've been in Japan and I know a lot about Japanese culture. This makes a lot of sense for them because they are very peculiar about how they meet and how they deal with businesses and how they actually, just by the fact of him flying there, must have been a big deal for them. And he got this hot property, and then what he did with it, like, I have no words. Like the film is horrible.
Yeah, but I was thinking the other day. Well, two things. Why hasn't there been another one, or like an animated version? That's interesting too. But what would the film have been in 1993?
Yeah, there's no story.
Remember, it's a platform game where you kind of go down pipes and you.
There's no story. Super Mario has a story now, so if you watch Super Mario Galaxy, which is one of the most famous ones, or Super Mario Sunshine, or even the last Super Mario that came out, Now you have a story. Now there are plots, and there's even cinematics in between the levels. But back then there was literally nothing. It's like Princess on the Castle. That's it.
Yeah, which I'm bringing up because I'm sort of defending the writers and filmmakers.
I know.
Who were like, well, what are we even going to do?
Absolutely. I know what you mean. I know what you mean. But let's not, I understand that, you guys are not here to listen about me bitching about a film that is really terrible. There is one thing that is not terrible about the film, and one thing that really is actually quite impressive. It's, the film is from 93, and my God, the film has a lot of CG, doesn't it? It has a lot of CG. It's really impressive for the time.
Really impressive. Lots of morphing and warping and animated effects, I guess you could call it. The film is actually a bit of a breakthrough VFX film for this one reason at least, which is it is, I believe, the first feature film to use the flame system. Which wasn't an Autodesk thing back then. I'm not even sure if it was a discrete logic thing back then, as in that particular point in time. There is an article on befores and afters which goes into some of that history. And, this is 1993. Remember, this is the year that Jurassic Park came out. And an explosion was happening mostly from ILM in terms of CG visual effects. So other films were getting on board, right? Or filmmakers and seeing the possibilities of this digital stuff.
Yeah. And they have a lot of composites as well, like actual background digital composites when they're flying around, and especially when they're in the tunnels, when he drops through the tunnel, the CG tunnel at the beginning of the film, and then also at the end of the film. There's a lot of really groundbreaking CG, and I think for that, I really loved to watch it again, because it's like a piece of history for sure. Especially the morphing. The morphing is really well done still. Like, I watched it again, and it still holds up quite nicely. But it doesn't work really well because everything around it just looks like a really cheap set, and everything looks cheap everywhere. But that's one of the problems. Don't get me started. But the film, you guys should go and see it again. But I guess we were talking about films that don't work, and the reason why this doesn't work is because it absolutely disrespects the material completely. I understand there was not much to go with. I understand that. But it doesn't even try. It is really disrespectful. The film becomes almost like a kid's movie at some point when they're like with the guns and walking around. And then this entire talk about person becoming devolutions and then becoming dinosaurs, and it's all...
I love that though. I loved it, and the makeup effects for that stuff was kind of cool.
It was,
to be honest.
Yeah, no, that was
kind of cool.
That was.
I just sort of, it's like you could have a few drinks, you could be half asleep and watch that film, and you probably enjoy it a bit more, I think.
I have one thing I would say. This is also a terrible time in history where we had too much product placement on films. And I don't know if you noticed, but the devolution guns that they use on the film, those are actually the Super Nintendo Super Scopes, which the Super Nintendo just came out at that time. And so they were trying to sell these scopes, which you could play gun light games to the TV. And so everyone that has, Dennis Hopper, when he has the light gun, when he has a gun on the film, that's actually the Super Nintendo Super Scope. I just can't believe what I was watching. When I saw that, I was like, oh my God, they're trying to push that thing. I can't believe, because it was a failure. The Super Scope was a failure. And so they're really trying to push... Right. I have to say Dennis Hopper is really interesting because, by this time he's like one of the most famous actors in the world, and he really, really hated the script, and to a point that he walked out of the set many times, and then they had to convince him to come back to do this, and to still... I know they're dead now, but both Bob Hoskins and both Dennis Hopper still to this day still said that this was the worst film they've ever made in their life. They hated it as well. Like, it's such an interesting story to see that, to see this behind the scenes and see how people are now looking at it. This thing, it's just yeah. What are you saying to say? Sorry.
Do you think the reason Dennis Hopper hated the script is because by then he'd read the script to speed and he knew how good speed was. I'm pretty sure that's it, right? Pretty
Oh
sure
my
that's the
god!
reason.
Oh my god! Oh, like I know, but he is amazing in Speed. You see, Speed is a very good movie. You see, now that's a good movie. Why didn't you
Not
think?
a game movie though.
Why didn't they do that? Why didn't they do something like that instead of this thing? You know.
They probably should have. Okay, Hugo. Another film that, look, it clearly didn't work, but it is interesting to talk about. And it's from 20 years ago, literally had its anniversary just the other day. Final Fantasy Spirits Within.
Yeah.
Have you seen it? Have you
Yeah.
rewatched it recently by
Yeah.
any chance?
I have. I know this film very well. It was mind-blowing when it came out. It was one of the reasons why I joined the visual effects industry. And I actually even had the pleasure of meeting the director in Japan a few years ago. And I met the VFX supervisor of this film as well when I visited Square Enix, because I did a few trailers for Square Enix for Just Cause 3. And I had the pleasure to go to Tokyo to visit them and then meet the people that were behind. Because the company that made the trailer that I directed for Just Cause, the CG was made by the same team that did this Final Fantasy film. And
Right.
yeah, and I even visit like the actual studio where they did the mocap and everything. It was really interesting to go around in a tour. I had an interpreter because none of them spoke English, but it was funny. But yeah, this film, groundbreaking. One of the, at the time when I watched it, it was photoreal, right? It was really photoreal. The way that you saw skin and the way that you saw actually hair, especially the hair. Oh my God, when she's on the on the space station and floating in the air, and you see the hair just floating around. But it's an absolutely failure from an attempting of making a video game, because I've played a lot of Final Fantasy games. This has nothing to do with Final Fantasy, like nothing at all. And I don't even know what happened. Like, the story has nothing to do with any of the Final Fantasy games. None of them. I really don't understand why it's even called Final Fantasy. And they have so many good stories. If they pick up the story from Final Fantasy VII, which is like this really gritty, futuristic story about mankind using the resources of Earth, and then there's like this kind of steampunk environment where they're living. That's a story they should have made a film. But no, then they made this thing, and I that's really strange.
Yeah. Okay. It's interesting you say it was groundbreaking. Now, I loved the hype of this film, to be honest, and I loved seeing it in a cinema, right? Final Fantasy. I remember it in 2001. But I remember back then, Hugo, I have to admit, thinking, why is everyone talking about this as being real digital humans when clearly it's not? So, I mean, let's be honest, they didn't end up doing that. They might have set out to do it.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they did set out to do it, and they were using great motion capture tools from Motion Analysis, I think, in Hawaii. They were using the latest Maya stuff to do it. They were using, the latest stuff. But as we know, digital humans for a whole feature film is near impossible today.
Yeah.
Right? It just is.
Yeah.
And do you know what I mean? I remember back then thinking, it's kind of weird how they're hyping this film as photoreal digital humans when it's like not.
I think it's but it was the best they could have done back then. That's the thing. I think at the time, because you see what they've done, what this company done is they did all these cinematics for the games that came out. Final Fantasy 6 and 7 and 8 all had these these CG trailers which looked like this film. And so that's where this comes from. They did all these cinematics and they looked really beautiful. And then they decided to do it as a full motion film, which was a bit of a disaster. The production of this film also was very difficult. They couldn't render the shots. They had a lot of problems trying to even pull out the shots, even actually making frames out of this, actually getting computers to render these shots was incredibly This is 97 or 98, or it's incredible by then,
Yeah. I meant to say that I liked the stylized look of the humans and the characters, but I didn't feel like it should have been pushed as a photoreal.
No,
You know,
because it aged
these are real
horribly,
humans.
didn't it? It aged
And
really badly. Yeah.
but you're right about something. It was a long production,
Yeah.
and so it's possible they really shot early mocap for this in like '97.
Yeah.
Um,
It was
and
groundbreaking
in
at the
that
time.
intervening time, ILM was doing amazing stuff with Jar Jar and the Mummy,
Yeah.
and of course, Weta Digital had jumped on Golem, and so which are not digital, like they're not photoreal digital humans, the characters I've just said, but for audience members, they saw a human performance in those characters, right? And then Final Fantasy's there as well. And they're like, oh, yeah, it's motion capture, but it's not. Well, anyway, that's what I thought the reaction was at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think the main detriment of the film is that you're right, didn't jump on Final Fantasy as a story thing.
No.
And it's kind of weird, like there's people, they're ghosts.
Yeah.
And it's very contemplative. There's a lot of just discussion in the cockpits.
And I understand that every Final Fantasy, there's like 15 of them. Every Final Fantasy game has a different story, and they don't usually have connections between them, not all of them. And they try to be set on this fantasy world where there are certain things that are connecting, but the characters are not connected. It's like a universe, and you have several planets in several places, and so it all lives inside this universe, but they don't really touch upon each other. And so I'm guessing this is just part of that universe, but it's just weird. The whole story is a bit flat, and I feel like at some moment the film is just trying to show off the technical marvel they can do at the time instead of focusing on the story. It's the story, the plot, the script is not good enough. I think that's the problem, so yeah.
And look, it could have been amazing. They definitely sort of, I know you mentioned Square Enix and the way it was crafted, but they really brought together all these different visual effects artists from America, Canada, Australia to go and work in Hawaii for the film. And then, many of them had to leave because there weren't many future projects after that. They did do some fun cinematics for the Matrix sequels.
Yeah.
The Animatrix, things, right?
The Animatrix.
Yeah, which I thought were really cool and fit in. What they did was they fit into that style.
Yeah.
I never thought they were going for photoreal, but they fit into a really fun style, which I kind of liked, actually.
Yeah.
On Befores and Afters, there's a fun story. I remembered a promo marketing piece where the main character, Dr. Ake Ross, is a CG character, and then leaves the game and walks into a live action environment, which is the mocap stage in Hawaii. And I remembered this sequence, which was on like the DVD for Final Fantasy. And so I talked to a few people, including Remington Scott, who was the animation mocap soup, I think, on the film. And, he talked about how that was done. So that's not quite coverage of the film, but a coverage of a little fun thing you should check out at Befores and Afters.
Well, the Blu-ray has a lot of stuff as well. So if you guys want to reminisce about how it was produced, there's a lot of extras on Blu-ray. There's also a beautiful book as well. I have the art of, which has a lot of the renders and a lot of the behind the scenes as well. It has some articles as well, which is it's a nice book. I don't think it's out for sale anymore, but you can still find it used on eBay. That's how I did it,
So Hugo, we've talked about a couple of older films that didn't really work, we think, from games to film. What about some more recent ones that you felt, maybe you wish they worked better? I don't want to trounce on any films, but it's worth mentioning the ones that you maybe wished had been huge.
Yeah, I feel like, obviously it goes without saying, everyone, we're not going to go and talk about all of them. There's like 50 of them, so we're not going to talk about all of them. So if we missed something really important or missed something that someone loves on the audience, just send us a comment. Maybe we can talk about it later on another show, on another episode. Mm-hmm. So don't feel jaded if we don't talk about all the films that were based on games. But for me, like other films that could have been amazing for me is, for example, I'll be very brief. Silent Hill is one of my favorite games ever. It's one of the best, most well-made horror games franchises in the world. Both Silent Hill 1 and Silent Hill 2 are some of the best games in the world. They're very old, they're from PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2. Silent Hill 3 and 4 are not as good, but, the first two are amazing. They did 2 films already. The first one is okay. It captures a bit of the interesting lore of Silent Hill, but the script is not very good. The second one is a bit of a disaster. I wish Silent Hill, which is a perfect franchise for making a film, would have been treated better. And I feel like it just has to do probably with budget, also script. Like, I feel like they could have done so much better because the story of the games are so strong, and they just talk a little bit about it. But the Silent film itself, it's interesting in terms of visual effects. It has a lot of really nice touches with the conversion from the normal world to the outer world. That's really interesting, and all, of course, the creatures. So that one, I wish it was better. I wish they would have done better Resident Evils. I mean, the Resident Evil films, there's 7 of them, or I don't even know how many there are. None of them almost have nothing to do with the games, and I never really understood why. So there's some characters from the game, but the main character on the film, she's not on any game. So I don't even know how that came about. There's some things from the game, but the normal story from the game is not usually done on these films. And the games, again, have such strong stories, they could have been reutilized. You have other things, like Doom would have been a great film. It's terrible, the film with The Rock. I can go on. Tomb Raider could have been a good film. They never really managed to get it to work really well,
What about... Okay, I'm dying to know what you think of the Warcraft film. The relatively recent Warcraft film.
It's okay. What can I say? I love that director. I love him. Like I love Duncan Jones, and I feel like it's a bit of a strange film for him to make, especially because Warcraft is loved all over the world, and it has a huge audience. It has millions of people playing the game, so it's tough to go into that kind of universe because expectations are like you're gonna have to deal with the fans.
Do you feel like Warcraft, it looked amazing? Let's just say that the characters, and there was something, it was highly elevated to an incredible look.
Yeah.
I have to say, I had zero idea what was going on when I watched that film.
Yeah.
The characters look similar, so it's hard to remember complex names.
Yeah.
I know that's the thing that you can deal with in the game, but I reckon audiences were just bamboozled by that film.
Yeah, it's really difficult to follow, and I mean, only if you. I guess it's a problem with all these films. If you don't play the game, and you don't really do any kind of introduction, then you have a problem because a lot of people or the audience are going to be alienated. A bit like Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat has that problem. People are not going to understand what's going on. But I must say this. I know it's connected to Warcraft because I think it has to do with Warcraft, but I think the biggest problem with these transitions from games to film have to do with the fact that they should really not happen. If you think about it, like a game is a game and a film is a film. And I feel like there's this forcing to try to make it a film. And the problem is, I've been playing games for now 30 years, and a video game is an interactive experience where you play the plot and you change it as you play it. And so the plot itself is usually thinner because it's usually less complicated because you make the story, because you are playing it. And so to translate that into a film, it's incredibly difficult because even if you look at at games that are super popular, like Assassin's Creed, for example, beautiful story, beautiful game, but it takes 50 hours to play an Assassin's Creed game. And there's 12 Assassin's Creed games, and they take 50 hours each. And then you try to make a film with an hour and a half to try to make that story. You cannot condense it from a 50-hour to an hour and a half, and then you lose that interactivity in the process. So I feel like I think it's a bit of an impossibility for you to really do the game justice, especially on these type of games, because you're not playing the film. And I feel like we've talked about moments where it worked it worked because they maybe did a good spin on the script, or maybe they had really talented people behind it. But from a standpoint of view, from a starting point of view, I don't think it's very easy to create something from a game because you cannot play it when you watch it. I think that's the problem.
You bring up, one thing you bring up there, which is not the interactivity thing, is you're obviously dead right, and I feel like we're gonna try and do that crossover a lot more now. But from the game's point of view, I don't think films are gonna be the crossover. I think it's gonna come from more cinematic side of games. But you mentioned the 50-hour thing. Maybe that is one of the inherent problems with films, is that they're 90 minutes or 2 hours.
Yeah.
They're trying to cram it in. You're trying to understand all this stuff. I wondered recently whether some games might work better as streaming series. And one series I enjoyed, and I've never played the game, but it is more like a movie, as I understand it, as in the game is more like a movie to begin with, and that's The Witcher. Right?
Yeah.
With Henry Cavill.
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoyed that series because they just, as I said with Mortal Kombat, they just launch into it.
Yeah.
They just do it.
But they have the time. But they have time because they have this season.
It's adult oriented.
Yeah.
There's sex.
Yeah.
There's violence. It's a bit, fantasy. If you're not into the fantasy thing, then don't watch it. Right? I liked it. I think they're making the second series now, or have made it.
They are. That's a really good example of something that works. And absolutely right. Every game that we've talked about could have been a TV show, and that's why The Witcher is really faithful to the novels, and the novels. The game was also very faithful to the novels, and I think that's why it works so well. But also,
it comes from a different source. You're right, novels. Exactly. So there you go.
But also, it helps that Henry Cavill is a fan of the game. The creators are fans of the game. They know exactly how the game works. There's 3 games to work with. You have 3 Witcher games. It's been a franchise going on for a long time. And the game takes about 100 hours to play, like the original one, the Witcher 3, I mean. Yeah. Witcher 2 is like a 40-hour game. I finished 2, never finished 3 because who has the time to finish it? So I played most of it, but never finished. But they are really faithful, and you really nailed it now. You need the character progression. You need to have time to develop, because that's what happens when you play a game. Like when you play a game like The Last of Us, for example. The Last of Us, which is a highly cinematic game. You even cry when you're playing that game. I even wept on a moment of the game. When you're playing that game, which is a 14-hour, 16-hour long game, depending how much you go into it, and you travel and you learn the story of Ellie and you learn the story of Joe, and you have snippets and you have documents and you see some magazines, and they banter to each other, they talk to each other, and you start learning more and more and more. And by the end of the 12 hours, you know everything about Joel and you know everything about Ellie. This is impossible. You cannot do this in an hour and a half. That's the thing. Mm-hmm. So I'm really looking forward for the TV show that they're going to make about The Last of Us, because I feel that they're going to nail it, because they will have time. They will have the 5, 6, 7, 8 hours to actually construct these characters. And you're absolutely right. Like all these games, Silent Hill could have been a TV show. Resident Evil could have been a TV show. All these games should have been a TV show, to be honest. Because you would have had the time, and not only that, but also you could have introduced secondary characters, which some of these games have beautiful story plots that have to do with side quests. Like a lot of these games have really small little moments that are stories of themselves. Like when you're playing The Witcher, sometimes you're playing the game, and then suddenly you are going to a side story. And then you spend 3 hours on that side story, and then you come back to the normal story. So it's almost like that's another TV show, So that is the interesting part of video games, because you can take it on any direction, Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're dead right. And I'm looking forward to more of those perhaps streaming shows that are about games. I'm looking forward to films that are about games. I think they're making the Uncharted game right now with Tom Holland.
I'm not very happy about that one. It doesn't. I don't know. I thought I played all 4 games. There's a 5th game as well for the Vita. I played all 5, but the mainline games, the 4 ones, they're beautiful games, really good. The story is so complex as well, and it's basically Indiana Jones crossover with Tomb Raider, like literally Indiana Jones, but in a different way because it's much more witty and much more comical, even more than Indiana Jones, because the main characters are so likable. But I'm worried. I'm worried about this film because the cast is wrong. Like, it doesn't look like them. It sounds to me like one of those Super Mario situations again, where they are not really respecting what the source is. They're not really casting it correctly. They're like, they're going to make this film just out of the blue. I saw some stills. No. It looks bad. I don't know. I'm not.
Go and read. I'll try and remember to put this in the show notes. Go and read the Wikipedia page for Uncharted, the movie. And it is a joy to read because they've been wanting to make it forever. I think Mark Wahlberg was was going to be cast, and that might have suited your idea more about who the character was.
The best actor ever to do this, and now he's too old, is I can't remember the name of Nathan... The main character of Firefly and Serenity. Remember the TV show Firefly?
Nathan Fillion?
Yeah, he was at some point... Yeah, Nathan Fillion, exactly, man. He was at some point cast to do the Uncharted. He was supposed to be the main character.
Okay.
And he looks exactly like him when he was younger, of course. And he even did a short film where he plays him. So it's like... That was the one that should have been, but now it's too late. It's gone. But Mark Wahlberg would have been nice. I don't know why they cast him as the old guy with the mustache, because he doesn't even have a mustache. I don't know. Like he's playing Sully, which is the old guy from the game. I don't know. If you've played the game, you know it's really strange that
right.
They've cast.
I might be mixed up in the Wikipedia thing. I thought he might have been originally the younger character. Like
no.
5 years ago.
No. They basically just cast. It's all badly cast. I don't know. I'm not. I am really looking forward for the Last of Us. Not looking forward for Uncharted. I don't think it's going to work. It should have been a show. It shouldn't have been a film. I don't think it's going to work out.
Okay.
We'll see.
Well, we'll see. We'll come back in a couple of years and do a show on it.
I'm sure. Maybe I'll be surprised. I hope so.
I think we're going to wrap up the conversation there about games. There are a billion games and films. There are a billion to talk about. I'm only going to say one film that everyone should definitely go and watch, and it's really surprising that I'm going to say this, and I was so surprised that I love this film to death, and it's Angry Birds 2.
Oh my God.
Which is a Sony Pictures animation film. Imageworks did the work. It's
really funny.
Hilarious. Yeah. It somehow captures the zaniness of Angry Birds.
Yeah,
it's better than the first film. It's got hilarious moments. It's for adults.
Yeah.
That's unusual.
And it's coming from a game that has no story as well, so they've really nailed it. They really managed to do something.
They nailed it.
Yeah. Go and see it. If you're going to do that, I'm also going to do a suggestion as well. So there's one game that is not based in games, but it is a video game in itself, and I really would suggest. I know it's a bit weird, but if you go back to 1999, David Cronenberg made a film called Existence, where they are playing a video game in the film. And on that film, it also has some really nice visual effects, especially a creature work that they have at the beginning of the film. But that film really captures the gameplay. It really captures how you play games. Although it's not based in the game, they're playing a virtual reality game on the film. Really good film and really well directed by David Cronenberg. Jude Law is the main actor. Like it's nice. Has a lot of visual effects as well. It has some CG creatures. Also has a lot of green screen as well. So go and watch that because it's faithful to games. It's a bit. I guess it's similar to the film we were talking about. It's similar to Free Guy, where Free Guy is not based on a game, but it's actually one of the best. Video game films ever made, So Existence feels to me like a bit like that.
Yeah, it's a great film. Hugo, we always wrap up with saying where people can find us on the internet. Where's the best place for you?
So for me, just Google Hugo's Desk. You'll find Hugo's Desk on Twitter, Hugo's Desk on YouTube, Hugo's Desk on Facebook, everywhere, and also Hugo Sigera on Twitter as well. That's my main Twitter.
People can find me at Ian Fails on Twitter. Of course, beforesanafters.com. Don't forget also this podcast is an amazing combination of a video podcast that Hugo edits with great clips, and that might be how you're watching us now. There's also an audio podcast, please, if you're listening there, please like and subscribe on the audio podcast, or give us a rating. And same thing on the YouTube clips and video that Hugo does. Hugo, I really enjoyed talking about these films and the games, even though I'm not a gamer. It was actually a real pleasure to dive into those. Thank you so much.
No problem. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks for listening, everyone. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.